It is all. Can you pull it out of the holder a little bit? Because then.
Hey, Democrats, we're going to start. And as always, welcome to Democrats and friendly unaffiliateds and other members of the opposition. I'm Vicki Shea. I'm the chair of the Farrington Democratic Club. We are here in the gathering place, which is the Homeowners Association building, and we're also on Zoom. So hello, Zoom people. 3 reminders and 1 brief order of business before we begin. Please turn off your cell phones. Please don't throw out the beverage cups. They're hard plastic and we wash them in the dishwasher in between meetings and reuse them. And also, don't throw these in the trash. We'll just put them in the kitchen or put them somewhere and we'll recycle them. And to ask a question, please wait for the microphone so that everyone can hear easily, including the Zoom audience. So if you have a question and you're here in the room, raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. If you're online, you can type your questions into the chat box and they'll be read out. So our brief order of business is the election of the club's officers, and we will be standing by the results of the election the first time. So per our bylaws, co-chair Lynn Whitener is going to handle this item.
All right. Good evening. I am the vice chair. Hold the mic close. How's this? Is this better? Okay. So we elect officers for a 2-year term. Our existing officer panel is willing to serve again. That would be Vicki Shea as chair. I am the vice chair. The secretary is Mary Cullen Carroll, who is not with us tonight because she's ill, and the treasurer is Tina Graybard. We will be happy to accept nominations from the floor for any of these positions. If you nominate someone, they must be in the room and they must agree to stand for election. So, are there any nominations from the floor? All right. Yes.
I move the slate by acclamation. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Nicely done. And now for the main event. Our speaker is the wonderful Lisa Sorg, an extraordinary investigative reporter, currently with Inside Climate News, formerly with NC Newsline, and throughout her career, an advocate for social and environmental justice. We came up with a title for her talk to reflect everything she knows about science, climate, energy, and us. Lisa Sorg. Okay. That's yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me, and hello to everyone in the room and on Zoom. I just also want to clarify that I work for a nonpartisan newsroom, nonprofit, Inside Climate News, and I am also nonpartisan. In fact, full disclosure, I am registered as unaffiliated. So I don't want, even though I'm happy to speak to political clubs, I want to make sure that I'm not taking a political stand on this. So anyway, again, I'm Lisa Sorg. I was here a few years ago when there was COVID. Well, when there was COVID everywhere, there's still COVID. And now I'm back and I'm thrilled to be here. A little bit about myself. I am originally from rural Indiana. I'm originally from a town so small that it makes Goldston look like Paris. That's pretty small. And I went to Indiana University. Hoosiers, or do we have some Hoosiers in the, did you go there? What years? What was your major? Well, I was there during those times, bachelor's in telecom, 83 to 87, and then I failed creative writing, so then 92. I didn't take the final. It's a long story. Well, so I worked at the Herald Times in Bloomington and also at an alt weekly called Bloomington Independent. Then I moved to Texas, which was a wonderful place to be a journalist because the corruption was everywhere. It was just so, I mean, it was like in the air. You just breathe in corruption and then you breathe out corruption. Unfortunately, it was also extremely hot. And while I loved San Antonio, my husband and I were like, 100 degrees all the time is just not real good for outdoor loving people like us. So then we moved here in 2006. And so I live in Durham, and North Carolina is my home now, even though I'm technically a Yankee. I really do love it here. So I worked at the Indie Week, for those of you who might remember it as the Independent Weekly. And I was there from 06 to 15. And then I joined NC Policy Watch, which later became NC Newsline. And I became their environmental reporter. And I've always loved reporting on the environment. When you're a journalist, you often have to, cover a little bit of everything, but the environment is where my heart has always been. And so that was a treat for me to be there. And then Inside Climate News is a national outlet, and I am the North Carolina reporter there, which means I cover the state. I was telling Jeffrey earlier that I was in Red Springs 2 days ago, and I'll be in Hildebrand I think Friday. And so I do a lot of traveling in a hybrid. It's as good as I can get. I can't afford an electric car right now because all the tax credits are going away. But anyway, so that's my background, and I live and breathe this. I love being a journalist. I love telling stories. I love holding people accountable. That's what I do as an environmental journalist. So today I'm going to talk about some of the pressing issues in North Carolina right now in terms of the environment and also the nation. This is not going to be a full expanse of everything because we would be here for days and days and days and days, but it's an overview, and I'm happy to take questions, either at the end or in between, whatever the protocol is. So this picture here, Science, Climate, Energy, yes, that is the STAR facility in Goldsboro, and what that does is it takes coal ash and it repurposes, it burns it again, basically, and turns it into beneficial, like concrete and whatnot. The problem with this is that people around there are still exposed to the pollution, and this is largely a Black community that lives near this STAR facility in Goldsboro. So one of the things, next slide, please, that we're seeing in North Carolina is a massive natural gas build out. So what does that mean? Well, coal is going by the wayside, even though the current president thinks that coal is going to make a comeback. It's unlikely. So instead, our utilities are turning to natural gas. And so to give you an overview of the things that are being built right now, we have the Mariah Energy Center. If you've heard of the Mariah Energy Center, it's in southeastern Person County, near the Durham line. Enbridge, which used to be Dominion or PSNC. I won't go through all the corporate shell game, but basically it's Enbridge is building two 25 million gallon tanks that will hold liquefied natural gas in this. It's rural, but it's not unpopulated. You live out here, you know what rural but populated is. And there are people there who are living right on top of it. When the land was cleared to build this 50 million gallons tanks, a lot of dirt went into the creeks. And like we were talking earlier with someone, we were talking about VinFast and the fact that when they cleared their land, when sediment goes into a creek, it's not just like, oh, it's dirt. What's the matter with dirt? Well, dirt, too much dirt in the bottom of a creek or a stream does several things. It suffocates some habitats that live on the creek bed. It carries other pathogens with it. They hitchhike, like E. coli says, hey, there's a dirt particle. I'm going to hitchhike and then I won't have to like expand so much energy. And then when I can get in someone's drinking water well, I'm in full force to make them ill. So sedimentation, while it sounds really wonky, is really important. So this Mariah Energy Center, a lot of sediment in the creeks. Nobody at the state did anything concrete about it. And now we've got these two, what this LNG does is it cools natural gas to like a bazillion degrees below zero. Well, not a bazillion, but well below zero, like 250 degrees, something like that, below zero. And then they're going to use that supposedly for very, very cold winter days, which we don't even have it really much anymore. So we also have several pipelines, the T15, which runs from Duke Energy's new gas plants that they're going to build in Person County all the way to Eden. Then we have MVP Southgate, which we thought was dead. It's not dead. It's coming back. It's going to be near Eden. Eden is kind of like the crosshairs of all these. And then the Transco pipeline, which is this orange line, it is expanding. It's taking out, there's going to have to be additional takings of land. And then, of course, we have the natural gas plants. Duke wants 2 in Person County and 2 in Iredell County. So there's a lot. And the thing is this is not abstract. Next slide, please. So here's some lovely people.
Hippies.
They're kind of hippies. They're beekeepers. And the photo person at Inside Climate News said this looks like some kind of album cover, and it kind of does, So they keep bees. They're lovely people. They live near the Davidson-Forsyth County line, and the Transco pipeline expansion is going to take their bee farm out. They're going to have to either move it, which is not as easy as you'd think. Moving bees is not easy. Bees don't want to move. They're like, we like it where we are, don't move us. So that's an example of people who are, in the path of this pipeline. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people like this. Next slide, please. This is when I was talking about the Mariah Energy Center, this is what it looks like from the air. That used to be trees and some ag land. That's what it looks like. Or it did last fall. I mean, now there's infrastructure, but that's, I want to say 400 and some acres. I have to go back and look, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And as an aside, I just want to bring up, and we're going to talk about legislation a little bit, but there's a bill in the legislature right now sponsored by Representative Jimmy Dixon, who is from Duplin County area, Republican, who wants to sharply curtail the ability to put up solar farms on land that is agricultural. He's saying, well, all these solar farms are just eating up the ag land, eating it up. And I want to say to people who think solar farms are eating up farmland to look at the Mariah Energy Center. Very habitat, just terrible. Next slide, please. So all this natural gas build out is not just harming the people who have to give up their land, parts of their land for it to, whether it's eminent domain or whether it is, they just agree to, okay, here's, half an acre of my property that I can never get back. But natural gas emits methane. And methane is an even more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide in terms of it's more short-lived in the atmosphere, but while it's there, it does more damage. So this is what happens when tons and tons of methane and carbon dioxide get into the air. We have Helene. I was this is in Swannanoa just a couple months ago, must have been maybe February. And people are living in fields, in campers, because the devastation, you just wouldn't believe it. When I was in Swannanoa and saw just cars and rock, huge parts of buildings in the stream bed, in the riverbed, it's phenomenal. It's just, I mean, we've had terrible, terrible floods and hurricanes in the east, and that this is not a competition of who can have the worst hurricane. But in the east, it's flat, and you can see how, you can see the damage. There, here it's, the terrain's crazy. There are landslides, and it's going to take, I think, at least 10 years for this area to recover, and parts of it probably never will. The other thing that is happening right now, I'm working on a story, is in the, they want to get all this debris out of the riverbed, which is obviously very important, especially if you're into fishing or white river rafting, or, tourism's huge there. But what's happening is they're not doing it very carefully. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has contractors that were just basically going in and just driving bulldozers in the middle of the stream. And what happens then is that kills the habitat. I know that Wildlife Resources Commission had to do some emergency relocation of some mussels and some salamanders called the Eastern Hellbender, because they were just in there like, let's get some boulders out. And it was just willy-nilly. And there are ways to do it properly, but they didn't. And now, there's parts of those rivers that are going to have to be, are going to have to heal. And while I understand why to get the debris out is so important, like I said, you got to do it right. So these are all the climate change things that you don't think about. For example, all the wildfires in the West, that is in part because there's so many trees down from the hurricane, and then it gets dry, and then there's a lightning strike, or some person, smokes and throws a cigarette out, or it could be anything, that it gets dry, and then the trees that are left catch on fire, and now we have immense fires and evacuations out there. So the West is getting hammered. And these storms are getting stronger. They're ramping up very quickly, and in going in places that you never thought they would. I mean, but people moved to the mountains because they thought, no hurricanes. Next slide, please. Other things that I can tell you from experience recently, that climate change also, if you sneeze, if you have pollen allergies, it makes it worse. Climate change also, like I was talking about the wildfires, in terms of breathing that smoke, it contains something called, and this is really wonky, wonk alert, PM 2.5. Yeah. So it stands for particulate matter 2.5 microns. So a micron is less than the width of a human hair. So this is very, very fine soot, basically, that when you breathe it in, it doesn't get caught in your cilia. I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to do an anatomy lesson, but basically it gets in your lungs deep, burrows in the deep part of your lungs. It can get in your bloodstream. It can, long-term exposure can increase your chance of dementia. For women who are pregnant and exposed to PM 2.5 for periods of time will often have low birth weight babies or premature birth. I mean, PM 2.5 is bad, B-A-D. So there are air pollution situations that come from climate change. Next slide, please. And this was from 2024. We've had the hottest years on record. I want to say, I don't know exactly, but I think 4 of the 10 have been in the last 5 years, something like that. It's just been incredible. So we, in 2024, we ran 4 degrees above average since 1970 in Raleigh, Durham, and I guess, down here as well. That is hot. And as you know, I'm sure you've noticed that the summer is forever. This is why I left Texas. This can't happen. Where am I going to go, Maine? So climate change is real, and the current administration is, wanting more drilling, wants to roll back all the climate programs that were in place during the Biden administration. There have been a lot of nonprofits that have lost their grants illegally, according to the courts, where they, were awarded these grants under some climate projects during the Biden administration, and then when the current administration took over, they clawed the money back. And there are people who, they're having to lay off folks, environmental groups, or they're not doing the work that's really important, like monitoring the air or sampling water. I mean, this has real concrete ramifications. This isn't just like, oh, they got $50,000 and now they don't have it. No, this was going to do some really, really important work. And the other thing that's important also is that, a lot of the data disappeared from federal websites. Now, there are groups out there that are rescuing it. But the other thing to think about is there's not monitoring going on now. So we're losing some of the historical record for the future because no one's measuring it. And if you don't measure it, you can't do anything about it because it's like, oh, it never happened. Next slide, please. This is the Haw River, which we all love. Jeffrey, you work for the Haw River, or volunteer for the Haw River Assembly. And so PFAS, which I'm guessing, do people know what PFAS is? No, okay, PFAS, very bad. I'm just got nothing but good news today. So PFAS stands for perfluorinated and polyalkyl compound substances. There's 15,000 types of them, and they are found they're not natural like arsenic or something. They're human-made. They are in Teflon, microwave popcorn bags, pizza boxes, some personal care products, medical supplies. If it's grease resistant, stain resistant, water resistant, probably has PFAS. And what happens is when you're exposed to high levels of PFAS, you can have a myriad of health problems. It increases your risk of kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid disorders, high cholesterol, low birth weight, depressed immune system, obesity, lots of stuff. Everything you don't want to have, PFAS increases the risk of. So this is ubiquitous in the world. They're everywhere. They don't break down in the environment. You may hear them referred to as forever chemicals because it can take hundreds of years for them to break down. So they are in drinking water. They are in Jordan Lake. They are in my drinking water in Durham. Now, the dose makes the poison, but Pittsburgh has managed to get theirs under control because they had to install very expensive treatment on their water system. Typical drinking water systems will not remove this stuff. It just goes right through it. So this is a health crisis. EPA has set standards for drinking water last year, which are still in place, but who knows if they're going to get rolled back. Industry does not like it because they just want to keep pouring it in there. The other thing to know about PFAS is that it's been found in the food supply. If Chemours, which is near Fayetteville, is a big source of PFAS in North Carolina. There's others. There's some up in Burlington and upstream of the Haw, but it's everywhere. And next slide, please. One of the ways that it gets in the food supply. So this is a fire that happened in 2022 in Winston-Salem. There was a fertilizer plant, Weaver Fertilizer, had 600 tons of ammonium nitrate, which ammonium nitrate is highly ignitable. It is responsible for some of the most deadly explosions. Like there was one in some port in Syria, I think, and then there was one in Texas where, people died, or it leveled homes just for miles. This was a catastrophe waiting to happen. They had a voluntary evacuation of 6,000 people in Winston. For some reason, this plant was built in the 30s. It was all wooden. It had no sprinklers. And the great wisdom of the city of Winston thinkers decided to let houses be built all around there. Houses for people of color, houses for low-income people. And so this was a huge deal. It burned for 7 days. So one of the things that happened is that, the firefighters were pouring water on this thing, trying to keep it from exploding, because it would have leveled North Winston. It would have been completely done. So all this, it was fire suppressant water. The plant owners put a berm and they collected it because they didn't want it to go into the creek because it would have killed the fish and God knows what. So it had very, very high astronomical levels of ammonia because it's fertilizer, nitrogen, other things, but it also, as we found out, had PFAS in it. And at the time, there were not regulations for drinking water, and actually there are no regulations for it in fire suppressant water or anything like that. So what happened was, next slide, please, is the company shipped it to a dairy farm. They shipped this fire suppressant water to a dairy farm. It was tested. It had PFAS in it, but because there were no standards, DEQ and the EPA said, you can go ahead and spread it. And they did put restrictions on how much they could apply at one time because it had so much nitrogen in it that it was going to kill the crops and it was going to get into the groundwater and then, do bad things. Well, the farmer did not follow instructions and over-applied it and killed some. It went on a corn silage farm or field, and corn silage is used to feed cows. So the other amazing thing, I just did the story 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. So what happened is no one has ever tested the milk. No one has ever tested the groundwater, the drinking water wells, this is out in the country. The family lives, there's private drinking water wells all over the place. No one has ever tested the surface water, which goes into the Yadkin River. And so this is a real problem. And sewage sludge in the more conventional way, where it just goes to the wastewater treatment plant, is often used on farm fields. And that's another source of PFAS that they're now learning about and just how bad it can be. And the EPA just announced, or maybe it was the National Institute of Health, that they're no longer going to study the human health effects of PFAS in the food supply. Yeah. So next slide, please. I have no idea where I'm going with this. Okay. What's happening now? Hint, it's all bad. So I talked about stopping the research on climate change and health, PFAS research in food. We're just going to drill even on public lands, federal lands. The Trump administration has announced that it would like to log in national forests, including those in the mountains, our mountains, North Carolina mountains, and just the general rollback of environmental regulations. There was one day when Administrator Zeldin said, this is Liberation Day. And it was the day that he announced that he was going to roll back. I mean, it takes a while to roll back, but his intent was to roll back 31 rules, environmental rules. And so now it's supposed to go through a protocol. It's not just like, okay, they're done. It's not like, did you ever watch Bewitched? Where like, bing, okay, no, that's not how it works. Although who knows with this administration what they can do. So on a national level, the environment is under assault. That is not a political statement. That is just a fact. Climate data has been removed from federal websites. The Environmental Justice Office is kaput. Environmental justice is a huge part of covering the environment because it's not by accident that, for example, in the Winston Weaver fire situation, that people of color and low-income people of any ethnicity or race, that's where the pollution goes. And that's because those folks have the least amount of social and political and financial capital to fight it. There is a reason that they're not, at the country club. uh, terrible factories. So for example, there's an old missile plant in Burlington, which I did not know about. I did several stories about it. This is, I guess, kind of good news. So I did several stories about this old missile plant in Burlington. It was they made guidance systems for Nike missiles. And I was driving around one day during the pandemic because I was bored, and I'm like, let's go look for some hazardous waste. Truly, that's just how bored I was. And so I didn't know that this plant, which is on Church Street near Church Street, near Western Steakhouse. Is that right? Western Steakhouse? Yeah, Church and Graham Hopedale Road. Anyway, I'm looking at this sarcophagus of this 22 acres of these wild buildings. And I kind of like old decrepit buildings. So I was like, I bet that was an old mill. So I go over there and it's all fenced around, but I'm looking and I'm thinking, this is wild. And then I go around the back and there's all these homes that literally from probably this wall to that wall to the plant, their backyards are looking right at it. And it turns out it was where they built missiles, guidance systems, and it's full of pollution, full. And the Army, which is responsible for cleaning up below ground, had basically not done anything for decades. And the good news is that they're cleaning it up. And it's going to take a long time. And we'll see, I'm not going to promise you it's going to be pristine, but there were a lot of environmental justice issues because the people who live in that neighborhood are all Black or Latino. They're all, most of them are renters and living in very bad conditions. And there were unhoused people living in the plant. Actually, the plant itself was purchased by now the third property owner. Because when the government has surplus property, they can sell it. So they sold it, and the person who bought it knew that it was contaminated, and they were responsible for you can't let the lead and asbestos go places. So they're responsible for everything above the ground. Well, this guy, and it's in the record, so I mean, I'm not telling you anything that's secret. His name's David Tsui, Tsui, and he bought the property and he illegally demolished part of it, which sent rats into the neighborhood. And he wanted it to be in the brownfields program so that he could redevelop it through the state. But unfortunately, he has a record of defrauding the federal government in cases related to orthotic shoes for diabetics. Some kind of Medicare, Medicaid thing where I don't have a record, so I can't tell you how they think, but that's why he couldn't get a brownfields agreement, because he had a record of both civil and criminal penalties. So how did I get on that? Just saying there's good news in that the Army's cleaning it up, TBA on everything above the ground, but good things can happen. Next slide, please. And then in the state, so they're on holiday break, which means nothing really horrible can happen until Monday.
That's good.
Get you glass half full.
So, we go through periods where there's not a lot of environmental regulation or deregulation. Like you think they've done everything possible they can to destroy the environment, and then they think of some more things. So the state budget is kind of following the whole Doge model of cutting things. Now, this is not passed. This is still being hashed out, but the state budget would completely eliminate the environmental justice kind of office in the Department of Environmental Quality. Horrible. It would allow Duke Energy. So Duke Energy is supposed to have these, by 2030, they were supposed to have reduced their carbon emissions by 70% over 2005 levels. That's a lot of numbers, but long way of saying they were supposed to really pull it down. Well, they've decided they can't make that. So they've asked the legislature you don't have to have any interim benchmarks. Can we just have where we have to be net zero by 2050? It's like, if I say to you, I would like to lose 30 pounds by August, but I don't want to lose any weight until July 31st. And then I'm just going to cut off my leg. And that's how I'm going to lose 30 pounds. So it was originally in its own budget or its own bill, Senate Bill 261, and then nobody was buying it. I mean, it passed the Senate, I think, but the House was like, no. So what do they do with bad bills? They put them in the state budget. So it's in there. But like I said, that's a lot of hashing out to do. There's also another bill to streamline water quality permitting. So it would expedite if you file for a state water quality permit and the feds have already, you have to get, often you have to get a federal permit and a state permit. And so if you have your federal permit, they want, basically DEQ has 5 days to approve the permit. That is insane amount of time. It's hardly any time. It's like that. And as Representative Julie Mayfield brought up in committee, the state and the federal permitting processes, they have different things they consider. So it's not just the same. And she brought up the debris removal in the West and how those streams are being decimated. And if you were to streamline the state permitting, and they already do that with certain air permits. They've have a pilot program, which I assume they're going to renew, where they give bonuses to people at DEQ engineers who meet certain time benchmarks for the largest air polluters. It's called the Title V bonus program. So the lawmakers they don't want to wait any time. They just want to ram them through. And then there's another bill that would allow, at least in the West, if you don't increase the size of your building footprint, you could rebuild in the floodplain. Which doesn't, I understand in an emotional way why you would want to rebuild in the place that you are. These are commercial buildings, by the way, that not residential. But you also have to think about repetitive loss, and that's a real thing. There are houses in places in North Carolina that have flooded 3, 4, 5 times. And how many times can you flood before you just have to say, I can't live here anymore? One of the things, and then I'm going to close, is there's something called the Strategic Buyout Program. And I'm fascinated by this program where the government comes in and says, if you live in a floodplain and you have repetitive loss, we'll buy your property and give you cash, and then that property becomes a park or something besides resident. No residential can ever be there again. And while I get that, and it's a highly individual decision whether to participate, is entirely voluntary, but it can destroy communities, and it can rip people of their cultural identity or their sense of place. So I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying there are real ramifications on more of an emotional and humane level when you have to be in these buyout or when you choose to be in a buyout program. And the other thing that's interesting is a lot of folks, especially in the East, they live in these low-lying areas, these floodplains, because of redlining or because, frankly, white people put them there. They went to the worst land. They were shoved on this in the floodplain in the swamp. And now they're there, and now now we want to yank them out. And if you think about the housing crisis in North Carolina, if I pay, let's just say my house is worth $180,000. Where do you think you can actually buy a house for $180,000 in North Carolina? Not very many places, unless you, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not going to be a very nice house. So there are real conundrums to the, and this all ties back to climate change, though. These are the secondary, third, tertiary, whatever, the fourth, fifth, sixth, as the dominoes fall of what happens when the climate changes. People lose their houses and they lose their sense of self and they lose their neighbors. So my last slide, please. So this is a happy note. This is, last year, remember the cicadas? Did you have them here?
Yeah.
This is in my backyard. Oh my God, I loved them so much. I was absolutely, okay, This is such a geek I am. I would go out in my backyard every day and those brown husks, I would collect them. And I have a goldfish bowl like this big around full of them that is still sitting in my house. And I love it so much. So this one that's white with the red eyes, that had just hatched. And that's his friend down there that had been out for a while. So anyway, that's my contact info. I have cards and I'm happy to take questions. And thank you for your attention. No questions? Okay.
So I can be partisan in the question, you can be nonpartisan in the answer, but this is a stupid question. Like, couldn't we just put bleach in the body or, put the light in the ears or whatever? Are there any scientists working on how to do something about PFAS?
Yes, there are a lot. There are a lot of scientists working on PFAS. Many of them are right here in North Carolina. Detlef Knappe is one of them. He's at NC State. Jamie DeWitt is no longer in North Carolina, but she's on the Secretary of Science Advisory Board. There's tons of Heather Stapleton at Duke, Lee Ferguson at Duke. There's a lot of people doing work on treating for PFAS, figuring out how to dispose of it. Because let's just say you have a whole house. Let's say you have a private drinking water well and it has PFAS in it. So you would probably get a whole house filtration system like a reverse osmosis or granulated activated carbon or something expensive. But what happens is you have to change the filters out. Well, where do the filters go? They get shipped. In some cases, if it's a wastewater treatment plant, they ship them either to, I want to say Buffalo, or there's a place in Columbus that burns them. And so it never, that doesn't quite solve the problem. The other thing I want to mention that I forgot to put on the slide, but it's crazy, and it's about PFAS, plastic. Okay, so, there's a microplastic problem in the world. We have these break down into itty bitty things, and then we drink these microplastics, and they wind up in our brains, and we end up shooting ivermectin. Sorry. Yes. But anyway, so microplastic's bad, but because the fossil fuel industry this is a fossil fuel product, it's a petroleum product, and they are now pushing making energy by burning plastic. So in January, UNC Chapel Hill had an air permit application in at the state where they wanted to take plastic from Wisconsin in little chips and burn it in lieu of coal in their cogen plant. And there was outrage. I mean, Chapel Hill Town Council or Town Hall was like packed, overflow room, overflowed. Nobody wanted this because they were worried about the PFAS being emitted into the air, as well as just burning plastic, okay? UNC withdrew their application. I mean, people are just like. Then we had another situation, which is still in limbo in Fayetteville, where a company wanted to burn plastic to make ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel to power data centers and crypto mines. Well, that's on hold too, because the community where it was going to happen got wind of it. I wrote about it too. And they were like, not. So I guess the moral of that story is, though, that sometimes you can advocate and win and keep something like that out of your community. But to answer your question, PFAS is also in the air. And so there's also studies on how to, keep it from getting into the air. Good question. I don't know.
Can you tell us anything about the solar panels and the Duke Energy's efforts to discourage them or to keep us from utilizing them because of their own long-range plans to maintain whatever they're doing.
Well, I can't speak to their intent, but, you know, there are solar panels. There have been actions in the legislature which have tried to portray solar panels as, you know, the great source of contamination in the world. Now, I'm sure there are contaminants in making them. There's no energy source that is completely clean. But I think that's what's kind of behind, I don't know that Duke is behind this, but that's kind of been the anti-solar sentiment has been, you know, either they're poisonous and that's why we have a whole now like recycling program for them, although they would have recycled them anyway. And that's also the agricultural argument. And it's basically just because they don't want solar. Now I can't speak to Duke. I'm just saying that that's kind of what's going on in the legislature. I think Duke is saying we want natural gas. I mean, that's what they want. And that's also by building natural gas plants, you have a guaranteed return on investment. So you make money by building these huge infrastructure projects, and solar panels don't make as much money.
I think it's clear in your presentation and just in the newspapers in general that the federal administration is not going to be part of the solution at this point. What about municipalities and counties? If their state is going along with the national policies, is there any recourse? Can they fight back?
Yes, that's a great question. I think an example is, well, the answer is yes, and I'll give you some examples. Carborough, for example, is suing Duke Energy over allegations that Duke knew about the risks of climate change a long time ago and didn't do anything to curb their fossil fuel build out. So, of course, Carborough, where else would it be? Except maybe this room. I think, and you know, former DEQ Secretary Michael Regan, who went on to be EPA administrator under Biden, had a great point at one time. He was speaking, I forget somewhere, and he said, the local government is where if you want to stop a project or you want a project to go forward, the local government is where to go. That's because once it gets to a state level, you know, the state is in the business of, frankly, approving permits. I mean, it has to be really bad before they'll not approve it. So if you really want to make a difference, you have to advocate on the local level to your commissioners, to something as wonky as the Board of Adjustment. Now you think, oh my God, I would rather stab myself with a fork than go to the Board of Adjustment. But I can tell you why that's important. There was a mine that was, or not a mine, they're called stump dumps. It's basically a land clearing and inert debris landfill that was proposed in Vance County near Kittrell. And it was going to be at the headwaters of the Pamlico River. Yeah. And there were mussels in there and terrible things. So the community's like, we don't want this. And it was rural but populated. And it went to the Board of Adjustment, and the folks in the community rose up and said, we don't want it. And there was all sorts of, you know, high drama. This also happened in Yadkin County regarding a mine. Also went, you know, all the way through to the local government, and the people fought it off because they pressured their local officials. And the other thing about local officials is they got to run into you at Food Lion. You know, your state reps and senators probably shop in the middle of the night. I would. Not, I'm teasing. They're like going to the 24-hour Harris Teeter, you know, like, is anybody in the lot?
In the next town.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the Harris Teeter in Graham if I represent like Goldsboro. So, I mean, they're more accountable to you. And so if you have something that you feel very strongly about environmentally, that's where you need to start. And if it's, for example, if something's near a school, like the Yadkin mine, it was going to be not very, it was going to be like the property line was going to be right next to an elementary school. And so they got the school board involved. So, yeah, that's where to start.
Okay, two things. One is that Chatham County does have a climate advisory committee that works with the county government. And I know some of those people are probably on the Zoom right now, or they've signed up and they're planning to go on later. But when we send out the next information from the club, we'll include a link to that. Okay, so that people who want to stay local and do something that might actually be effective can get involved with that. And my final question, since I have the microphone, is if you could only pick one or maybe two organizations, I mean, everybody in this room is like so flooded with emails at this point from every possible group that needs money and needs your help and needs you to this and that and the other. But so if you could only pick one or two that would be a way to be even slightly effective in advocating against climate change or for science or, you know, anything that you're talking about, what would be your one or two
Oh,
recommendations?
man, that's rough. Well, I would follow Bill McKibben. He's part of 350.org. He knows a lot and he's always got good wisdom. And so you're thinking of advocates, not news sites.
One advocate or place that needs money.
Oh, that needs money. Well, that would be everybody. I mean, I would think about, you know, one national outfit and one local outfit, because if we're talking about local and, you know, I don't want to advocate for one or another because I talk to all of them and they're all wonderful. But if I had to split my money, I would choose one that was in my backyard and one that was doing more work on a national level. And that would include maybe, for example, the Southern Environmental Law Center, which does a lot of litigation. So you might want to think of, you know, litigation and then, you know, something that's boots on the ground doing like river cleanups or something. So without naming names, that's kind of how I would do it.
Hi. Since we are not tracking and keeping track of lots of things these days, because if you don't measure it, it doesn't happen.
Correct? Thank you.
Are other people keeping track? And even though it's a smattering here and a smattering there and a smattering somewhere else, hopefully those smatterers talk to each other somehow. So we have fewer weather balloons, but somebody still may know a hurricane is coming, et cetera.
Yes, all you have to do is go out and look at the sky, and if it's black and it's windy, then you know maybe you should go seek the lowest floor in your home. No, I mean, I think there are still scientists doing this. It's hard to know, frankly, who's doing what, but I mean, I trust that there are people, even if there aren't weather balloons going up anymore. So there is some data, but I think the other point is that it may not be consistent and it may be very regionalized. And it's just right now, the lack of and I'm not saying the lack of transparency on the people who are collecting the data. It's just that we don't know who is. The other thing that is important to know is that, and this is an example from North Carolina, many years ago, I mean, within the last 20 years, the legislature decided to cut funds for air monitoring. So there are fewer, they're called ambient air monitors. So they just measure what's kind of in the air that day. And there are some, but I think there's 70 some, and there used to be 130 or something like that. So there are fewer data points. There are parts of the state that aren't well covered in terms of having ambient air monitors. So that's, you know, how do you know what the air is? So I think the work of the nonprofits that have had their funding cut, for example, they filled in the gaps. And that's why that's so devastating. So I wish I had a concrete answer for you, except that there is still data being collected, but it's very catch as catch can. And we probably won't even know who's doing what until the storm passes.
Okay.
But if you're a scientist out there and you're collecting data, I'd love to hear from you.
So she's the only person who can make pollution funny, I think. Let's give her a big round of applause and thank her.